Hey guys, tonight we travel back to the far north, where icy fjords meet smoky wooden huts, and life depends on tides, patience, and the favor of the gods. You'll be stepping straight into a Viking village, somewhere along the ragged coast of what you'd now call Norway, around the year 950. The air bites, the gulls scream, and the salt sticks to your lips. You probably wouldn't survive the first morning, not because of battle, but because you'd freeze, starve, or accidentally offend someone's ancestor spirit before breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world people are listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the creak of timber and the faint warmth of an open hearth. Smoke curls lazily toward the thatched ceiling, escaping through a narrow vent. The scent is heavy, wood, wool, and the faint tang of drying fish. Outside, gulls cry above the fjord. You step out and blink against the gray morning light. All around you, small turf-roofed houses nestle between rocky slopes, their doors low and rough-hewn. The village feels alive in its quiet way, chickens scuttling between feet, children shouting in bursts, and women hauling water from a stream that looks half-frozen. The first thing you notice is how everyone moves with purpose. No one loiters. The Vikings' world is shaped by rhythm and necessity. There's no pause button, just the constant push to prepare, maintain, or survive. You see a man splitting logs with precise swings, his beard dusted with frost. Another hammers iron nails at an outdoor forge that pops and hisses. Someone hands you a wooden pail. You've been volunteered to fetch water. You trudge down the slope toward the stream, your boots crunching over frost. The cold bites instantly, finding the seams of your clothes. When you lean to fill the pail, you catch your reflection in the water, pale, breath steaming, eyes watering from the chill. You're starting to understand why they say the Norse were forged by hardship itself. When you return, the longhouse door opens into a dim orange glow. Inside, you find warmth again, and smoke thick enough to sting your eyes. The central hearth burns low but steady. Around it, families eat quietly from wooden bowls. You're handed something resembling porridge, made from barley and goat's milk. It tastes earthy, smoky, and faintly sour. You swallow it gratefully. A man across the fire eyes you curiously. His name is Bjorn, you're told, a farmer and fisherman. His hands look like they've never stopped working. Not much food this winter, he mutters, half to himself. But the sea gives when it wills. That's your first lesson here. Everything, the food, the weather, the stories, is at the mercy of nature. Historians still argue whether Viking society was primarily agricultural or maritime, but out here, it's both. Fields and fish sustain life together, one feeding the other when luck falters. The women, wrapped in thick wool aprons, move between chores with quiet focus. One tends to the loom near the wall, her fingers pulling colored threads with hypnotic rhythm. Another churns butter from sour milk, humming a tune older than memory. You can't understand the words, but you recognize the tone. It's not joy or sorrow, but something deeper, like endurance turned into melody. You look up at the rafters and notice herbs hanging in neat bundles, angelica, thyme, and wild garlic, saved from summer. Their scent cuts through the smoke, sharp and green. A small charm of carved bone dangles near the doorway. Protection against evil spirits, someone whispers. It rattles softly whenever the wind creeps in. As you sit there, spooning more of the strange porridge, you catch snippets of conversation. A young man jokes about a neighbor's clumsy fishing. An older woman scolds him for tempting fate. Mock the sea, and it will mock you back. Laughter, then silence. Even in humor, respect for nature's unpredictability runs deep. Outside again, you see the fjord glinting under the weak sun. A group of men push a small boat toward the water, its hull black with pitch. You're waved over to help. The wood creaks as you shoulder the weight. It's heavier than it looks. The boat's owner explains that they'll row out for herring later, if the weather holds. If it doesn't, they'll mend nets or repair fences. There's always something waiting to be done. One quirky detail historians love. Viking homes sometimes kept animals inside during the harshest months, not out of affection, but practicality. Sheep and goats produced heat, and in the dark of winter, any warmth counted. You can imagine the smell, damp wool, hay, and smoke blending into a constant background note. Comfort was a relative term. By late morning, the village hums in full motion. A young boy chases a runaway hen through the mud. A woman scolds him without looking up from her spinning wheel. You help patch a roof with sod blocks, work that numbs your fingers but keeps your mind strangely calm. Every action here feels circular, ritualistic. Gather, build, store, repeat. Yet beneath that steady rhythm lies something restless. Bjorn mentions that the chieftain's son plans to sail south soon, toward richer lands. They say the English monks have gold chalices the size of your fist, he says with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. You sense the quiet tension between farmers and raiders, the same people, different seasons. As afternoon light slants over the fjord, the village pauses. You watch smoke rise in thin blue lines from every roof, mingling with the mist. For a fleeting moment, everything seems timeless, the same as it was 1,000 years ago. Then someone's dog barks, children shriek, and reality folds back in. You return to the longhouse for warmth. The air feels heavier now, the hearth crackling louder as dusk settles. Someone starts singing, a slow, deep song that vibrates through the wooden walls. You can't catch the words, but you feel the weight of them. Stories, prayers, memories, they all sound the same in the half-dark. Outside, frost forms again on the door latch. You touch it briefly, the metal biting your skin. The cold never really leaves here. It just waits for you to forget. The day in the Viking village ends as it began, with smoke, salt, and the quiet acceptance of struggle. You settle down near the fire, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket. The floor is hard, the air thick with the scent of peat and ash. You listen to the breathing of those around you, steady and human, and you start to drift, not from comfort but exhaustion. Tomorrow will come early, and it will look almost exactly the same. Morning comes before you're ready. There's no rooster crowing, no sunlight slipping gently through curtains, just the creak of wood and the chill of dawn pressing against your face. You blink into the smoky dimness of the longhouse, realizing the fire burned low during the night. Someone stirs nearby, a child coughs, and a woman mutters something sleepy before dragging herself upright. There's no hesitation, no lazy stretch under blankets, just movement. You push yourself up too, still wrapped in the rough wool cloak someone loaned you. The air bites instantly. Breath fogs out in faint white wisps. The morning routine has already begun. The woman you heard is adding peat to the hearth, coaxing weak embers back into flame. Someone else opens the door, and a gust of icy wind sweeps through, carrying the smell of the sea. A few children groan from their sleeping spots. You're starting to understand, comfort isn't the goal here. Continuity is. Outside, the world looks gray and silver. Frost clings to the grass and to the thick timbers of each home. You can see a few villagers already at work near the shore, hauling nets that glisten faintly with ice. A pair of women scrub pots at the stream's edge, knuckles red and raw, voices low and rhythmic. The whole village moves like a slow engine, everyone doing their part to make sure no single flame or body goes cold. A woman named Runa waves you over. She's older, her hair braided with bits of wool, her hands strong but weathered. "We start with the fire," she says, handing you a bundle of dried moss. Everything starts with the fire. You follow her lead, crouching near the hearth as she layers kindling and chips of pine. It's a delicate balance. Too much wood and the smoke chokes you, too little and the flame dies. Runa hums under her breath while she works, a low, tuneless sound that fills the silence. Soon, the smell of peat and pine fills the air again, thicker now, comforting in a strange way. Someone places an iron pot over the coals and pours in barley and goat's milk. The porridge returns, the same smoky, chewy substance from yesterday, but your body accepts it more willingly this time. Hunger humbles you quickly here. As you eat, Runa begins to talk about the coming day. The goats need feeding, the chickens have wandered too far again, and one of the boats needs its nets patched. You notice how every sentence is tied to survival. There's no "if we have time" or "maybe later." Every moment already has a task waiting inside it. You help carry water again, then gather firewood from the forest edge. The trees groan softly in the cold. You can smell sap, moss, and distant smoke, the trinity of scents that defines Viking air. A man chopping logs nearby nods to you, then points to a fallen branch. You help him drag it closer to the pile. His name is Torleaf, and though his expression is stern, there's warmth in the nod he gives you afterward. Respect here is silent, built on small actions rather than words. Historians still argue whether daily Viking life was truly harsh or simply disciplined. Some accounts describe endless toil and deprivation, while others highlight the strong communal ties that made such work bearable. Watching this place in motion, you start to think both are true, misery and meaning walking hand in hand. The chores blend into a quiet rhythm. You scrape ice from wooden troughs, you help patch the roof of a small storage hut, you carry buckets of feed to restless animals. Your muscles ache in a satisfying way. Every so often, someone cracks a small joke or bursts into song. A line or two about Odin's ravens or a clumsy farmer's daughter who turned into a fish. Even here, humor survives. Inside one of the homes, you see how mornings unfold for those who stay indoors. Women spin flax into thread using simple wooden spindles, their fingers moving faster than your eyes can follow. A young girl mends a tear in a tunic, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in concentration. A boy sharpens a knife, his expression serious. Everything has purpose. There's no idle play, not because joy is forbidden, but because time is precious. You notice how clean the homes are despite the mud and animals outside. The floors are swept, tools hung carefully, beds neatly lined with straw. Every object feels cared for. The Vikings, you realize, lived in what modern people might call controlled chaos. A world constantly threatening to fall apart, held together by small acts of maintenance. Runa catches you staring at a carved wooden post near the doorway. It's shaped like a coiled serpent, its eyes darkened with soot. "Keeps evil spirits away," she says, as if explaining something obvious. Or maybe just makes us feel better. That shrug, that easy blend of superstition and practicality, it feels deeply human. You start to see why archaeologists keep finding charms and amulets buried under thresholds. Even Vikings needed psychological insulation from the cold. Around midday, you join a small group to tend the livestock pens. The animals grunt and shuffle, steaming in the chill air. Their heat feels almost sacred. One quirky fact: in some Norse regions, families literally slept beside their cows during winter nights to share warmth. You glance at the low roof of the animal shed and think, yeah, that checks out. Desperation turns cozy quickly when the frost creeps in. You spend the next hour collecting eggs and scattering grain. A rooster eyes you suspiciously, puffing his chest. "Careful," someone warns with a grin. He once chased the blacksmith's wife straight into the fjord. You step back politely. When you finally rest, it's not comfort that you feel, it's relief. You sit on a wooden bench, staring at the smoke curling from the chimneys, and realize how the village never truly stops breathing. It inhales when people gather, exhales when they work apart. There's a rhythm in everything: crackling fire, scraping tools, sloshing water. Even the silence carries sound if you listen long enough. In the distance, you hear a faint horn. It's not for battle, just a signal that the fishing boats are ready to launch. The men gather near the water, their voices low and practical. Runa calls out to them, reminding one to bring back driftwood if they find it. Nothing is wasted here, not food, not time, not effort. As evening edges closer, the sun hangs low behind a wall of clouds. You help gather the last bundles of wood and follow Runa back to the longhouse. The fire burns brighter now, the hearthstone cracked and blackened from years of use. The air is thick but inviting. Someone pours you a wooden cup of mead, thin, sweet, and warm. It slides down your throat like liquid sunlight. You stretch your sore hands toward the flames. Runa sits beside you, staring into the fire. "Tomorrow," she says softly, "will be much the same." She smiles, tired but content. And that's how we like it. You think about that as you lie down later, wrapped in the same wool cloak. The wind outside hums like the sea, steady and endless. You close your eyes, half expecting dreams of snow, smoke, and the distant beat of oars. When dawn filters through the smoke again, you're already awake. Not because you've slept well, you haven't, but because the longhouse stirs before sunrise, as if the entire village shares one heartbeat. The first sound is the creak of the roof beams in the frost. The second is the quiet, almost ritual scraping of someone sharpening an axe. Then the coughs, the yawns, the murmurs. You've begun to expect them. You pull yourself up, your body complaining at every joint. The air smells like smoke, straw, and sweat, an oddly grounding perfume. Someone passes by, muttering Morgan, the Old Norse greeting. You nod, even though you're not sure if it's polite to speak before the fire's lit. The hearth flares a moment later anyway, as if summoned by collective will. Outside, the morning fog rolls in from the fjord, turning everything into a blurred watercolor of gray and silver. The villagers move through it like ghosts, shoulders bent against the cold. You fall into step beside Bjorn, the farmer you met on your first day. He gestures with his chin toward a distant sound, the rhythmic thunk of iron on wood over and over again. The rhythm of work, he says simply, keeps us alive. You follow him toward the noise, where a pair of men are splitting logs, the pattern almost musical, 2 swings, a pause, another swing. Their axes bite deep, the sound echoing through the valley. Around them, others work too. One mends a fishing net, another stirs a cauldron of boiling lye for soap making, another scrapes a hide clean of flesh with a knife as sharp as the air. You realize every movement here has been rehearsed thousands of times, passed down from one set of hands to the next. You're handed a wooden mallet and directed to the small workshop near the forge. Inside, heat radiates from a clay furnace, red as molten honey. A blacksmith hammers a glowing piece of iron into a knife blade. Sparks fly, peppering the air like fireflies. He doesn't speak, just nods toward a bucket of water. You hold it steady while he plunges the metal in. The hiss is so loud it feels alive. Good, he says finally, voice rough as gravel. You can help with nails later. His name is Einar. You soon learn that blacksmiths here are somewhere between engineers and magicians. The tools they make, axes, knives, plows, rivets, literally shape the village's survival. Historians still argue whether Viking blacksmiths worked alone or in teams, but watching Einar, you get the sense he prefers solitude. Each strike of his hammer sounds personal. The rhythm of the day deepens. You move from the forge to the loom house, where women's hands fly through threads of dyed wool. The air smells of lanolin and ash. Their patterns are mesmerizing, diamonds, spirals, knots, and you notice something strange. They're not just decorative. Each design tells a story, a protection charm woven in color. One woman glances up at you and says, "Our men wear our luck into battle." Then she laughs softly. When they remember to. From there, you help stir a vat of fermenting fish guts meant for fertilizer. The smell nearly knocks you backward. You gag, earning laughter from a few onlookers. You get used to it, someone says cheerfully, which is doubtful. Still, this, like everything here, has a reason. The fish fields feed the grain that feeds the village. Every unpleasant task sustains another layer of life. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Stir, hammer, spin. The human engine never truly stops. Even laughter has its place, like a spark in the gears. There's little privacy but no real loneliness either. The sense of shared effort fills the air heavier than smoke. You step outside to rest, breathing in the cold. From here, the entire village looks like a living organism. Smoke streams from rooftops, people move between homes carrying buckets or bundles, and faint shouts echo from the shore. A seagull wheels overhead, cawing, then dives for something invisible in the snow. You feel a quiet admiration. This world is brutal, yes, but also astonishingly efficient. Historians still argue whether Viking society was egalitarian or deeply stratified. Some accounts describe free farmers voting in village assemblies, others mention thralls, enslaved workers captured from raids, who labored silently in the background. You haven't seen open cruelty here, but you sense the hierarchy in the way people speak. Deference flows upward, like warmth from a fire. You take a break near the edge of the forest, chewing on a piece of dried fish someone handed you. It's salty, tough, and vaguely smoky, exactly what your body seems to crave. A boy passes by, leading a goat that refuses to walk straight. "She's smarter than me," he mutters, earning a small grin from you. Then, just as you start to relax, a horn blows from the village center. Everyone freezes for a moment before resuming movement, this time faster. "Work call," Bjorn explains as he strides past. "We build a roof today." You follow him to the half-constructed longhouse near the stream. The entire village gathers there, men, women, even children. The teamwork is breathtaking. Beams are lifted into place with ropes and poles, thatch passed hand to hand, gaps sealed with moss. No one gives orders out loud. Everyone just knows what to do. You climb up to help spread the thatch, fingers stiff, knees trembling slightly. The wind whips through your hair as you tamp down a layer of straw. Someone shouts below, "Careful!" The gods love to test newcomers. You laugh despite yourself. A moment later, a gust of wind nearly proves them right. By midday, the roof stands complete, golden and uneven but solid. Everyone cheers, not loudly, but with a shared sigh of satisfaction. Someone brings out a small jug of ale, and a cup is passed around. You take a sip, feeling warmth return to your fingers. The drink tastes faintly of honey and smoke. When you step back to admire the work, you notice something you hadn't before. Viking labor isn't just survival, it's ceremony. Every act of creation honors someone, something. The land, the ancestors, the gods. They might not speak of it in grand terms, but you feel it in the way their tools are handled, their fires tended. Later, as twilight deepens, you return to the longhouse. The smell of stew fills the air, fish, herbs, maybe onion. The heat seeps into your bones. You realize you've barely spoken all day, yet you feel strangely connected to everyone around you. Words are optional when work speaks for you. Before sleeping, Bjorn claps you on the shoulder. "You work like you belong," he says. It's the highest praise you've received so far. You smile, too tired to answer. The firelight flickers against the walls, turning shadows into gentle waves. You let the rhythm of the day echo in your chest, hammer, loom, axe, breath, and slowly, it rocks you toward sleep. You wake to the sharp scent of smoke and fish, an aroma that now feels oddly reassuring. Morning in the Viking village doesn't creep in softly. It thunders awake with the scraping of pots, the bleating of goats, and the muted curses of someone spilling water on their boots. You stretch, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and the world is already in motion around you. Outside, the air carries the briny tang of the fjord mixed with something heartier, roasting barley, perhaps, or salted meat. You follow the smell like a cartoon character drifting on invisible scent waves, ducking beneath the low doorway and into the heart of the longhouse. There, Runa stirs a pot of thick stew over the fire, her brow gleaming with sweat despite the cold. "Breakfast," she says without looking up. "Or lunch. Doesn't matter." You take a seat near the hearth. The bowl you're handed holds something beige and steaming, barley, maybe, with chunks of fish and what might be cabbage. You hesitate, but after one bite you're hooked. It's rich, smoky, comforting, the kind of food that fills not just your stomach but every hollow place your body forgot it had. "Eat," Runa says, half smiling. "We work better when we forget how hungry we are." The Vikings' relationship with food, you're realizing, isn't indulgence, it's endurance. Every bite is a calculation. Will this last through the week? The winter? The next storm? They don't eat to celebrate. They eat to survive the next unpredictable thing. Historians still argue whether Viking diets were poor or surprisingly balanced, but sitting here with your bowl, you'd bet on the latter. There's variety in simplicity: fish, grains, goat's milk, the occasional root vegetable, and, if you're lucky, honey or berries. You help carry salted cod from the smokehouse next. The structure is small and blackened, filled with hanging rows of fish that gleam like dull silver in the dim light. Smoke curls around your face, stinging your eyes. The smell is pungent, almost dizzying, but this is their lifeline. Without salted or dried fish, the winters would starve entire families. You learn that cod is traded like currency, each slab worth as much as silver in lean years. Fish doesn't rot if the gods approve, says an old man with a grin missing 3 teeth. Then he shrugs. And if they don't, well, you'll know soon enough. Later, you join the women in checking the stored grain bins. The wood creaks under your feet as you lift the heavy lids, peering into the darkness below. The grains shimmer faintly in the torchlight: barley, rye, oats, all neatly layered and sealed against dampness. Runa tosses a pinch into her palm, inspecting for mold. Good, she says. No mice yet. Yet? You repeat, raising an eyebrow. She grins. They always come. We just make it inconvenient for them. That, you realize, could describe Viking life as a whole, making hardship just inconvenient enough that it doesn't kill you. The afternoon brings another kind of work, preparing for the next feast. Not a festival feast, those are rare and extravagant, but a modest communal meal that helps morale when the nights grow longer. You're told to help the men brew ale, a process that looks more like wizardry than cooking. Grains are soaked, boiled, and stirred in great wooden tubs. The air smells sweet, heavy with malt. A thin foam bubbles at the surface, and you're handed a ladle to stir. Clockwise, someone warns, else Loki gets curious. One quirky tidbit from archaeology: Vikings sometimes flavored their ale with bog myrtle or wild juniper instead of hops, giving each brew a sharp, herbal taste. You can almost imagine it now, the bite of pine and sweetness of barley mingling in a single sip. The ale won't be ready for weeks, but anticipation alone warms the room. As evening settles, you're invited to help prepare the evening meal, a small feast by local standards. The hearth blazes high. Fat crackles in the pan, sending up golden sparks. Someone brings out a flat round of bread baked directly on the coals, and the smell makes your stomach growl audibly. Runa laughs, handing you a piece. It's dense, smoky, and slightly burnt. Perfect. When the food is ready, everyone gathers around the fire. Bowls are filled, hands clasped briefly in thanks. Not in prayer, exactly, but in acknowledgement. You eat slowly, savoring every bite of stew, bread, and dried fruit. A man across from you raises his cup of mead and says something about Odin's table never running out of ale. Someone else mutters, "Lucky him," and laughter ripples through the room. There's no feast without story, and tonight, the oldest man in the village begins one. His name is Halvard, and his voice is like gravel dragged through honey, rough, but melodic. He tells of a fisherman who caught a whale and tricked a sea witch, of a god who disguised himself as a seal, of a village not unlike this one, swallowed by the ocean for its arrogance. The children lean closer. Even the adults go quiet. You watch their faces lit by firelight, the tired lines, the half-smiles, the unspoken awe, and something shifts inside you. This isn't just dinner. It's culture. It's memory made edible. Historians still debate how much of Viking storytelling was entertainment versus spiritual ritual. But here, in the flickering glow, you feel no difference. The stories are sustenance, same as the fish and bread. Without them, life would starve in other ways. As the meal winds down, the air grows thick with drowsiness. The hearth dims. Someone adds another log, its crackle echoing softly. You sip the last of your watered-down mead and feel warmth spread from your chest outward. The night grows quieter except for the sigh of wind outside. Somewhere near the back of the longhouse, a child begins humming a lullaby in Old Norse, the tune rising and falling like the tide. The melody wraps around the firelight, gentle and haunting. You lean back, letting the sound fill the empty spaces of your mind. The smell of smoke clings to your clothes. The taste of salt still lingers on your lips. You realize this rhythm of hunger and satisfaction, scarcity and gratitude, is what binds the village together. You'll eat again tomorrow, but only if the sea agrees. The chill of dawn bites sharper than usual, and as you step outside, you feel the fjord's icy breath against your face. Smoke rises from every rooftop in lazy spirals, mixing with the crisp scent of frostbitten grass and the tang of the sea. You notice immediately that today is different. There's a quiet reverence in the air. People move deliberately, slower than usual, as if listening for something unseen. Runa meets you at the edge of the longhouse, holding a bundle of herbs. "Today is sacred," she says, her voice soft. You raise an eyebrow, though you suspect you already know what she means. A day dedicated to the old gods, a ritual woven into the fabric of daily life. You follow her to the central hearth, where smoke swirls upward in intricate patterns, catching the pale morning light. The first task of the day is preparing offerings for the gods. You watch carefully as Runa crushes herbs between her fingers, angelica, juniper, and something sweet that reminds you faintly of honey. She mutters words you don't understand, rhythmic syllables that roll off her tongue like gentle waves. A small fire is kindled in the corner, and she sprinkles a pinch of herbs over it. The aroma is heady and strange, but comforting in a way you can't quite explain. You help gather small stones and coins from the household savings, placing them near the hearth as instructed. Each item is chosen deliberately, meant to honor a specific deity or seek protection for the village. You notice a tiny charm in the shape of a raven tucked among the stones, an emblem of Odin, the All-Father. It feels almost alive in your hand. Historians still debate whether such offerings were purely symbolic or believed to have actual protective power, but here, in this frostbitten village, the intent is everything. Once the offerings are arranged, the villagers gather in a loose circle. There's no priest, just the oldest women and men guiding the ritual. You stand awkwardly, unsure where to place yourself. One of the elders smiles at you, nodding gently. "Close enough," he murmurs. The ritual begins quietly. A chant rises from the group, low and steady, harmonizing with the crackling of the fire. The rhythm is hypnotic. You find yourself swaying slightly, drawn into the cadence, the cold slipping from your shoulders as if the sound itself carries warmth. A woman strikes a small drum, its beat syncopating with your pulse. It's mesmerizing, even as the words are lost to you. Afterward, you assist in preparing the midday meal, which feels different today, more ceremonial. Fish is gutted, roots chopped, and barley stirred slowly in anticipation of the evening feast. The work is methodical, each motion deliberate, each ingredient handled with respect. You're learning that for the Vikings, food isn't just nutrition, it's a connection, a way to honor life, survival, and the gods themselves. By afternoon, the ritual concludes, and the village resumes its usual rhythm, though a softer undertone of devotion lingers. You walk past children playing, carrying bundles of firewood, and see a group of men repairing nets along the shore. Every action, even the mundane, feels like part of a larger cosmic balance. You pause near the edge of the fjord, watching the small waves lap against rocks. Some villagers sail out for fish, their oars dipping with hypnotic precision. Others tend animals, grind grain, or repair tools. It's a living cycle, seamless and unbroken. You notice small talismans hanging from houses and doorways, runes carved into wood, meant to ward off evil. The subtlety of belief is everywhere. One particularly quirky detail: some Viking households would place charms inside beams of their homes to invite fertility and health, even in places you'd never see. You remember Bjorn joking about the gods having a sense of humor, a sentiment that makes you chuckle despite the cold. Later, you join Runa in tending the herb garden behind the longhouse. The plants are tough and bitter, surviving frost and wind with astonishing resilience. She shows you how to crush leaves to release essential oils, how to mix them into poultices, teas, and tinctures. "This is what keeps us healthy," she says. "Not luck, not magic. These herbs, our hands and attention." Historians still argue whether Viking medicinal practices were genuinely effective or more psychological, but watching her, you realize both could be true. As the day moves toward evening, the villagers begin gathering for the evening feast, a smaller, quieter affair than a festival, but important nonetheless. You help lay out wooden bowls, fill cups with mead, and place bread beside plates of fish and root vegetables. The communal energy is palpable. Everyone shares in both labor and anticipation. By firelight, you watch as stories emerge again. Tales of gods, ancestors, and heroic feats. One woman recounts a voyage across treacherous seas, Another, the clever trickery of Loki. The children listen wide-eyed, occasionally giggling at a comedic mishap. You sip mead slowly, feeling the warmth creep inward, and reflect on the balance of belief, work, and survival. As night falls, the village quiets once more. Smoke curls lazily from the chimneys, and the distant fjord hums a lullaby in its ceaseless movement. You lie down near the hearth, still wrapped in wool, the rhythm of daily life settling into your chest like a heartbeat. Outside, the wind whispers; inside, the fire murmurs, and you drift closer to sleep, cocooned in the Viking world's quiet persistence. The morning air is sharp, carrying the scent of salt, smoke, and something earthy that reminds you of wet moss. You step outside the longhouse, feeling the frost stiffen your joints. The village is alive already. Children chase each other between homes, goats wander freely, and a pair of women haul buckets of water from the stream, their fingers red from the cold. Every movement is purposeful. Every step contributes to the rhythm that sustains life here. You follow Runa to one of the larger homes, where a family is beginning its daily chores. The father, a broad-shouldered man with a beard frosted at the tips, shovels hay into a trough for the livestock. The mother kneads dough at a wooden table, humming a tune that winds through the room like smoke. You notice the balance within the household. Everyone has a role, and every role matters. You're reminded how the Vikings relied not just on physical strength, but on cooperation and structure. Today, you learn more about the delicate hierarchies within these homes. Elders command respect, children are guided, and labor is shared according to experience and ability. You help a young boy milk a goat, careful not to startle her. The task requires patience and gentle hands. As you work, you overhear the father instructing his eldest daughter on how to repair a torn cloak. There's no scolding, just careful guidance, teaching survival skills while fostering resilience. You glance around the room and notice how items are arranged with intent. Every tool has its place, every vessel is worn but functional. Even small charms or amulets are tucked into nooks, protecting not only the household but also the family's sense of security. The women's weaving looms hum softly as threads pass under nimble fingers. Each stitch carries meaning, protection, beauty, and pride in craftsmanship. One scholar argues that Viking artistry served as both aesthetic and practical expression, a point you see confirmed in the precise patterns of each textile. Outside, you help repair fences and gates with Bjorn. The sun is weak, casting long shadows across frost-laden fields. Your hands ache from handling rough wood, but the rhythm of hammering and measuring is oddly meditative. Torleaf joins you briefly, offering guidance with patience. "Strong hands, steady mind," he mutters. You notice the way hierarchy works naturally here. Skills command respect more than age alone. You pause to observe a curious detail. Small stones are placed strategically around certain posts and corners. Runa explains they are for protection, warding off spirits and keeping misfortune at bay. You recall similar charms inside the longhouse and realize that these superstitions, practical or not, are interwoven seamlessly into everyday life. They're as important as food, shelter, or labor. By midday, you gather with others for a brief meal, barley porridge with bits of salted fish. Conversations are quiet, mostly instructions or observations. Even jokes carry a layer of practicality. A laugh might mask an important lesson about survival or resourcefulness. You notice a child mimicking an adult's movements, learning by repetition, a strategy repeated through generations. Historians still debate how much of Viking culture was codified versus improvised, but you see both in the way children participate fully in labor and ceremony. Later, you join a small group repairing nets along the shoreline. The rhythmic tangle of knots feels almost meditative. Nearby, a boy recounts an encounter with a fox, describing in detail how it stole a chicken and disappeared into the woods. Everyone listens intently, nodding at the cleverness of the animal. You chuckle, thinking that survival often depended on paying attention to details, big or small. As afternoon shifts toward evening, you witness the subtle dynamics of home life: whispered disagreements over chores, careful negotiations about food portions, quiet expressions of care through small acts like mending torn clothing or fetching extra water. Every interaction is functional, but also deeply human. The balance of hierarchy and affection keeps the village strong. You rest briefly, watching smoke curl from chimneys and frost glint on the rooftops. A raven circles overhead, croaking, and you recall that it's not merely a bird here, it's an emblem of Odin. Small reminders of faith punctuate daily life, invisible threads linking survival, belief, and identity. By nightfall, the longhouse is filled with warmth from the hearth and the scent of stew. Families gather, sharing stories, laughing softly, and maintaining bonds strengthened by shared labor and mutual reliance. You settle near the fire, feeling both exhausted and oddly secure, understanding that in a Viking village, survival isn't just about skill, it's about structure, connection, and respect. The sun is low in the sky, casting long, pale beams across the frost-kissed village as you trudge toward the weaving hut. The chill bites through your layers, but you're used to it now, or at least, accustomed enough not to flinch at every gust. Today, Runa has assigned you a lesson in Viking craftsmanship, textiles, clothing, and the pride woven into everyday objects. She hands you a scratchy piece of wool, and you wrinkle your nose. Fashion isn't always comfort, she says, half joking, as if reading your thoughts. Inside the hut, the air smells faintly of lanolin, smoke, and the tang of damp wood. Women sit at looms, hands moving faster than your eyes can follow, threads weaving into intricate patterns of diamonds, spirals, and interlocking knots. Each design carries meaning, protection, fertility, or simply the mark of a family. You watch, fascinated as one woman finishes a scarf-like piece and nods in approval at her work. Every stitch is purposeful, a tiny act of resilience. You attempt your first knot, fumbling awkwardly. Runa chuckles. Not everyone is born with nimble fingers, she says, though there's warmth in her voice. She guides your hands patiently, showing you how tension, rhythm, and care can transform a rough piece of wool into a wearable creation. You start to see why Viking clothing wasn't just protection from the cold. It was identity, craft, and a statement of competence. Around you, small details tell stories. A girl hums softly while she spins flax into thread. A boy examines a braided cord, tugging at the edges and testing its durability. You realize these tasks are not just survival skills, they're lessons in observation, patience, and pride. Historians still debate whether Viking textiles were primarily functional or also status symbols, but seeing the meticulous work, you know they were both. After a while, you move outside to help repair a cloak for one of the older children. The wool is thick, patched in places with mismatched pieces from other garments. You admire the practicality. It's a patchwork of history, utility, and thrift. Torleaf explains that every tear, every stitch, has a story. You almost expect the cloak to whisper its past to you. Later, you assist with jewelry making. Small beads, bone carvings, and twisted metal pieces are arranged on a wooden tray. You learn how Viking women incorporated these into daily wear, using them not just for beauty, but to signal family, luck, or marital status. One woman shows you a delicate brooch, explaining that it once belonged to her mother. It carries her strength, she says. You feel a strange reverence for such small objects, tiny but weighty with meaning. Historians still argue about the degree to which Viking men and women participated equally in crafts, but walking through this hut, you see collaboration, observation, and skill crossing gender lines seamlessly. Even children are absorbed into the process, learning both practicality and artistry. As the afternoon sun dips lower, you join the group to mend fishing nets near the shore. The rhythmic motion of knotting feels almost meditative after the intricate work with wool and jewelry. Seagulls wheel overhead, cawing in chorus, while waves lap gently against the rocks. You catch sight of a small wooden carving tucked into a nearby post, a serpent coiled protectively. You recall similar charms inside the longhouse, realizing how decoration, superstition, and daily labor intertwine. By evening, your hands are calloused, your fingers stiff, but there's a quiet satisfaction in the work. You've transformed raw materials into tools, clothing, and adornments, all acts of survival imbued with personal expression. Around the fire, Families gather, sharing modest meals and stories that echo through timbered walls. The small achievements of the day, woven wool, repaired nets, patched cloaks, feel monumental here. You rest by the hearth, watching shadows dance across walls. The chill of the fjord remains outside, but inside, warmth, labor, and pride have created a sanctuary. You think back to the scratchy wool that greeted you that morning and marvel at the beauty born of necessity. Here, survival is craft, and craft is survival. The morning fog clings stubbornly to the fjord, softening edges and dulling the already muted sunlight. You trudge down the slope toward the village's trading area, a narrow strip of cleared land where boats are pulled ashore, nets repaired, and coins exchanged. Today, you're learning about trade, the lifeblood of survival that stretches beyond the village's borders. Even in this isolated corner, the world feels larger than the small cluster of homes around you. Men gather near the water, examining incoming boats. Some carry barrels of salted fish, others bundles of furs or small sacks of silver coins. You follow Bjorn as he inspects a shipment of cloth, its fibers rough but valuable. Trade isn't just goods, he says quietly. It's information, trust, and luck. Sometimes more luck than anything else. You nod, realizing that in a world without banks or contracts, relationships and reputation matter more than raw wealth. A few merchants approach, speaking in a tongue you don't understand. One hands over a small pouch of silver in exchange for salted cod. You notice the careful weighing of coins, the deliberate counting of pieces. Each transaction is precise, ceremonial almost, because a mistake could mean ruin. Historians still debate how standardized Viking currency actually was, but you can see why coins were treated with such care. The quirky side of Viking trade appears when a young boy tries to barter a carved wooden bird for a loaf of bread. The merchant laughs but plays along, examining the carving. It's simple, yet clever, an intricate design etched into pine. The boy grins proudly. You realize that trade wasn't purely economic. It was social, playful, and inventive. Small victories in negotiation carried as much weight as hauling a full barrel of fish. You are handed a bundle of furs to deliver to a local home. The scent is musky, almost animalistic, a reminder that these pelts come directly from the hunt. Carrying them, you notice the weight, the texture, and the sense that this is more than mere property. Furs symbolize status, protection, and survival. In winter, they could literally be the difference between life and death. Nearby, a woman barters a basket of eggs for a coil of rope. You watch her eyes flick between the merchant and her goods, calculating value with practiced skill. Viking women often controlled household trade, demonstrating savvy that historians sometimes underestimate. You see firsthand how negotiation, intuition, and experience combine in these daily exchanges. As you wander past the boats, you overhear tales from travelers. Merchants speaking of distant lands, strange goods, and foreign customs. One mentions an English monastery with golden chalices and silver trinkets, another a market where grain is abundant but wages are low. The information spreads quickly, like whispers riding the wind across the fjord. You pause at a small stack of coins and artifacts, imagining the hands that touched them over decades. Each object tells a story of risk, effort, and ambition. Some coins are worn almost smooth, others shine freshly minted. Each carries weight beyond metal, the luck of a voyage, the favor of a god, or a clever haggler's charm. Later, you help unload a shipment of grains from a nar, a small trading vessel. The wind tugs at your cloak, and the waves lap rhythmically against the hull. You notice carved symbols etched into the boat's timber, a blessing from Odin, perhaps, or a warning to spirits of the sea. These small details blend practicality with belief, showing how faith is inseparable from trade and travel. By afternoon, you've moved from barter to bookkeeping of sorts, tallying goods, inspecting their quality, and learning how the villagers plan for scarcity. The lessons are subtle but crucial. Food, tools, and trade networks dictate survival more than brute strength alone. As dusk settles, the traders prepare to leave, the horizon turning a dull gold. You watch boats push off, oars cutting through cold water, carrying stories, goods, and fortunes elsewhere. Back on shore, villagers begin repairing nets and sorting fish for storage, already anticipating the next trading day. The day ends as it began, with labor, observation, and quiet reflection. You feel the weight of history and the pulse of a living economy, all contained within a small, frostbitten fjord village. Life here depends on balance. Work, trade, and trust, each as essential as the other. Morning arrives with a pale wash of light, glinting off frost and the distant fjord. You trudge across uneven ground toward the village's small workshop, ready to learn about tool maintenance and basic engineering. The Vikings were not only farmers and warriors, they were clever tinkerers, constantly refining axes, plows, and household implements. Today, you are part of that tradition, though you feel clumsy compared to the practiced hands around you. Inside the workshop, Torleif hands you a simple wooden plane and a chisel. Smooth the edges. Make it steady, he instructs. You take a deep breath and begin scraping along the rough surface, learning the rhythm of tool use. Sparks fly when a metal edge meets stone, smoke curling faintly. The work is painstaking, yet satisfying. You understand how essential precision was. A poorly maintained tool could mean broken equipment, or worse, a failed harvest. Nearby, a blacksmith hammers metal with a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. Each strike sends a reverberation through the wooden walls. You watch the glowing iron twist and bend, imagining the swords, knives, and nails it will become. Historians still debate whether Viking craftsmanship leaned more on instinct or codified knowledge, but the skill before you is unmistakable. Years of practice have refined each motion to near perfection. You assist by holding metal against the anvil while Einar hammers, careful not to falter. One quirky detail: some Vikings used moss or leather to cool and protect tools during shaping, a technique that seems simple but requires an intuitive understanding of materials. You marvel at these small innovations, practical, clever, and surprisingly elegant. Afterward, you step outside to help repair a wooden cart. Wheels need tightening, joints reinforced, and handles secured. Each movement is deliberate, every nail counts. You realize that in a village like this, maintenance isn't optional, it's survival. Neglect a tool, and the consequences ripple across the day's work, affecting food, trade, and even personal safety. You pause to observe children mimicking the adults, hammering small stakes into the ground with toy-sized mallets. They chatter in Old Norse, counting nails or arguing over techniques. It's fascinating. Learning is immersive, tactile, and immediate. You remember hearing that Viking children often began real work at a young age, and here, you see that tradition alive and thriving. By midday, a group gathers to mend fishing nets. You kneel beside a tangle of cord, weaving patterns under careful instruction. The work is meditative. Each loop and knot is purposeful, forming the web that will trap food and sustain life. A bird perches nearby, eyeing the nets curiously, and you recall that Vikings often observed animals for lessons in survival, behavior, timing, and strategy. Later, you assist Runa in repairing a roof that took damage during a recent storm. Straw, wood, and moss are layered carefully to create insulation against winter's wrath. You learn how Vikings understood weather patterns, material durability, and architectural resilience long before modern engineering manuals existed. Historians still argue about the exact techniques, but the logic is clear: every action preserves life, and every mistake carries consequences. The afternoon drifts into evening with continuous labor, tools repaired, nets mended, and structures reinforced. You feel a quiet sense of accomplishment. Each small task, repetitive yet necessary, contributes to the village's collective survival. There's a rhythm in the work: measure, cut, hammer, check, repeat. It's a slow, grounding cadence that leaves you both exhausted and oddly at peace. As the sun dips below the fjord's horizon, smoke curls from chimneys, mingling with the salty tang of the sea. Villagers gather near the hearth, sharing stories, laughter, and modest meals. You reflect on the day's lessons: patience, skill, observation, and respect for tools and materials. These elements, you realize, are as vital as food or shelter in sustaining a Viking village. The fire crackles softly, echoing through the longhouse as you settle in for the night. Your hands are calloused, your muscles sore, but your mind hums with understanding. In this small, frost-bitten settlement, survival is more than strength. It is knowledge applied, tradition upheld, and labor shared. Dawn arrives quietly, filtered through a haze of frost and lingering smoke. You trudge toward the village center, the snow crunching beneath your boots. Today's task is foraging and wildcrafting, skills that are vital when the winter stores begin to dwindle. Runa meets you at the edge of the forest, carrying a wicker basket and a sharp knife. "Nature provides," she says, voice calm, "if you know how to ask politely." You grin at the odd phrasing, but accept it as truth. The forest is a cathedral of frost-covered branches and muted sunlight. Each step releases the smell of pine, damp soil, and decay. You notice tiny footprints, foxes, rabbits, and perhaps a wandering dog. Foraging requires patience and attention. Every detail counts. You pluck small berries from low bushes, testing each for taste and safety. Some are tart, others surprisingly sweet. Historians still debate exactly how Viking diets balanced cultivated and wild foods, but your basket will soon prove that foraging was a reliable supplement to stored grains and livestock. Runa points out edible roots beneath the snow, small, knobby tubers that taste earthy and slightly bitter. "Will warm the belly," she says. You dig carefully, mindful not to disturb the surrounding ecosystem. The task is meditative, the silence punctuated by occasional birdsong or the rustle of an unseen animal. You start to appreciate the patience and knowledge required to survive off the land. One quirky detail: some Vikings used moss as a makeshift sponge or insulation in addition to food purposes. You find yourself marveling at the ingenuity. Every element of nature is observed and adapted, a testament to resourcefulness. Small observations like this make you realize survival isn't brute force, it's creativity. As you gather, Runa instructs you to identify plants for medicinal use. She crushes a few leaves and demonstrates their application for minor cuts or fevers. "These herbs save lives," she says, voice soft but firm. You notice the respect in her tone. Knowledge of the land is both practical and revered. Some historians argue that Viking medicine was more ritual than science, but you see how pragmatism and tradition intertwine seamlessly. By midday, the basket is full of berries, roots, and wild herbs. You help carry the harvest back to the village, feeling the weight of sustenance in your hands. Along the way, you notice subtle signs of the seasons: frozen streams, a patch of lingering frost, and the first signs of snowdrops pushing through the cold earth. Nature's rhythms dictate human activity as much as any village council. Back in the village, the harvested goods are sorted, preserved, or cooked immediately. Women boil herbs into teas, men store roots in the frost cellar, and children carry baskets of berries to the hearth. The integration of work and survival is seamless. Everyone contributes according to skill and strength. Later, you watch as the villagers teach children how to forage and identify plants, passing down knowledge essential for future survival. A boy points to a bright red berry, proud of his identification. "Not all berries are friendly," Runa reminds, smiling. "Remember, the wrong choice can be deadly." The lesson is both literal and metaphorical. Survival depends on observation, patience, and understanding consequences. As evening falls, you gather near the hearth, tired but satisfied. The smell of fresh herbs, cooked roots, and smoked fish fills the air. You sip a thin mead, reflecting on the day. Knowledge, observation, and careful action sustain the village as much as strength and courage. Outside, wind whispers across rooftops, carrying distant sounds of the fjord. Inside, the fire crackles gently, a small sanctuary in a harsh, beautiful world. The morning is crisp, the kind that makes your lungs ache slightly with each deep breath. Frost glitters along rooftops and fences, and the fjord reflects a muted gray sky, broken only by the occasional ripple of a fish surfacing. You're walking toward the livestock pens today, a task that feels deceptively simple but is essential for village survival. Animals provide meat, milk, wool, and even labor, and their health directly affects the well-being of everyone here. You arrive at the pens where goats, sheep, and a few sturdy cows are clustered. The animals stir at your approach, noses twitching, hooves crunching on frost. Torleaf hands you a bucket of feed. Start with the goats, he instructs. You scatter grain along the ground, feeling their heads nudge your hands eagerly. The warmth of their bodies is surprising against the cold morning, and you realize that tending livestock is as much about observation and patience as it is about brute strength. Next, you help a young boy milk a goat, a task requiring gentle pressure and rhythm. His hands are small, nimble, and practiced. You follow his motions, fumbling at first, but gradually find the correct squeeze and pull. The liquid flows into the wooden pail, warm and rich-smelling. Historians still debate how central dairy products were to daily Viking diets, but seeing the practice firsthand, you understand their importance in sustaining nutrition during long winters. A quirky detail catches your attention. Some Viking households would tie bells to goats to prevent them from wandering too far. You notice a tiny bell swinging on one goat, jingling softly as it moves. The sound is oddly comforting, a small, living rhythm in the frost-bitten landscape. You realize survival isn't only about food, it's about awareness, small innovations, and care. You also help tend to chickens, collecting eggs carefully and making mental notes of which nests are overfilled or cold. One egg cracks in your hand, and the children nearby burst into giggles. You laugh too, remembering that mistakes are part of learning, and in a village like this, small lessons are magnified by consequence. Later, you assist with cleaning pens and checking animals for signs of illness. Runa demonstrates how to inspect hooves, fur, and eyes for subtle changes. A sick animal today can mean hunger tomorrow, she murmurs. The statement is both practical and sobering. Even minor negligence can ripple into life or death outcomes. As midday approaches, you help shear a few sheep. The wool is thick and coarse, but surprisingly soft in places. The work is slow, meticulous, and requires concentration. The women of the village gather nearby to sort the wool, readying it for weaving or insulation. Each movement is part of a continuous cycle: animal care, wool preparation, textile production, and eventual use. By afternoon, the village comes together to distribute dairy, meat, and eggs. Bowls are filled, portions measured, and meals shared. You notice the quiet hierarchy in action. Elders oversee, experienced workers instruct, children observe and assist. Every member plays a role, each contributing to survival and cohesion. Historians still debate how egalitarian Viking communities were, but witnessing this collective effort, you see a blend of structured hierarchy and communal responsibility. As evening falls, the animals settle, and the village begins to wind down. You help repair a broken fence, hammering the last nail just as the sun dips behind the fjord. Smoke curls from chimneys, laughter drifts from longhouses, and the distant call of a raven echoes across the valley. You lie near the hearth, feeling the warmth seep into your bones. Today's work, nurturing animals, collecting eggs, and caring for wool, has been exhausting but grounding. You realize that survival here relies not on heroics alone, but on knowledge, observation, and the careful tending of life itself. The day begins in soft, muted light, mist curling over the fjord like a slow-moving ghost. You trudge through frost-laden paths toward the village's fishing docks, your boots leaving crisp imprints in the snow. Today, you'll learn about the vital task of fishing, how it sustains life and binds the community together. The cold air carries a tang of salt and seaweed, and gulls circle overhead, their cries echoing faintly across the still water. Torleaf meets you with a small boat, its hull dark and slick with moisture. "We'll start with nets," he says, gesturing toward bundles of cord piled neatly on the dock. The technique is deceptively simple: untangle, check for holes, mend carefully. You kneel beside a young boy, hands stiff from the cold, weaving cord with painstaking precision. Even minor mistakes could ruin the catch, a fact you feel in every nerve of your body. Historians still argue how standardized Viking netting techniques were, but clearly, experience was everything. You help carry the repaired nets to the boat, balancing them carefully. The water laps gently, each movement met with a faint resistance. You notice small carvings along the boat's edge, runes etched into the wood, perhaps invoking protection or luck. Vikings often incorporated spiritual practice into labor, blending pragmatism with belief. One scholar suggests these inscriptions were purely symbolic. Another insists they were integral to morale. Either way, you sense their significance as you steady the boat. Once the nets are deployed, the rhythm of the day emerges. Cast, row, untangle, mend, pull. The work is hypnotic, the chill-biting but steady effort warming your body gradually. Nearby, an older fisherman demonstrates how to read subtle signs in the water: ripples, bird activity, the scent of fish on the breeze. Observation here is survival. You realize that knowing the water is as important as knowing the land. One quirky Viking trick stands out. They sometimes added stones to nets, creating weighted lines that sank faster and trapped more fish. You adjust your net accordingly, feeling satisfaction as it settles correctly. Small innovations like this reveal their deep understanding of environment and efficiency. By midday, the boat returns to shore with a modest haul. Fish are sorted, cleaned, and salted immediately. The stench is potent but oddly satisfying, the smell of survival. You help carry baskets of fish to storage, noting how every step is choreographed. One spills, someone steadies, another sprinkles salt. Cooperation is constant, fluid, and unspoken. Back on shore, women begin processing the fish into preserved forms for winter. You assist with gutting and laying them on racks. Each movement is precise, learned through repetition and observation. The process is slow but rhythmic, the repetition almost meditative. A boy nearby hums a tune as he works, the sound blending with the lap of waves. As the sun tilts lower, fishermen gather to mend their lines and nets for the next outing. You take a moment to watch the fjord, silver gray and expansive, imagining the countless hours spent navigating these waters for survival. Every ripple, every gull, every wave holds significance. By evening, the village gathers near the hearth, the day's work complete. Fish are prepared for dinner, portions carefully distributed. You sit quietly, reflecting on the labor and knowledge that go into each meal, the collective effort sustaining life even in this remote, frost-bitten village. The fire crackles gently, the fjord whispers outside, and a profound sense of continuity settles over you. Survival here is a blend of skill, observation, and quiet reverence for nature's rhythm. You rest near the warmth, body tired, mind reflective, and slowly, the world softens into twilight calm. The morning light is pale and fractured as you trudge toward the village's communal barn, the smell of hay and livestock strong in the crisp air. Today's task is preservation, storing food for winter, ensuring nothing spoils, and that every resource is maximized. You quickly realize that in a Viking village, survival isn't just about hunting or farming. It's about careful planning, observation, and anticipation of scarcity. Runa hands you a basket of salted fish. Layer carefully, she instructs. Airflow matters. You follow her guidance, stacking fish in wooden bins, sprinkling more salt between layers. The scent is overwhelming but familiar now. You notice the methodical attention paid to even the smallest detail. Misalignment could invite rot, ruining days of effort. Historians still debate the exact storage techniques, but the principles of cold, salt, and layering seem universal. Next, you move to the root cellar, a subterranean chamber where potatoes, turnips, and other hardy vegetables are preserved. The temperature is cool and steady, the air smells faintly of earth and damp wood. You arrange roots carefully, mindful of gaps for ventilation. This is not merely organization, it's life insurance against the harsh winter. You realize the Vikings' understanding of preservation is both practical and ingenious, born of necessity and experience. One quirky detail strikes you. Some households placed small bundles of straw between vegetables to absorb excess moisture. Simple, yes, but remarkably effective. You pause to marvel at these small innovations, realizing that survival often relied on observation, creativity, and a willingness to adapt. Later, you help sort grains in large sacks. Barley, oats, rye, all are checked for pests or mold. Even the faintest discoloration prompts careful inspection. Each grain represents weeks of labor, the combined effort of the village. A mistake here could mean hunger, yet the work is rhythmical, almost meditative once you settle into it. By midday, the community gathers to inspect preserved goods. Elders guide, instruct, and correct where needed. Children assist, learning both techniques and responsibility. You see clearly how knowledge passes through generations, each small act of care reinforcing a larger system of survival. Afterward, you help prepare a modest midday meal from stored provisions: boiled root vegetables, salted fish, and barley porridge. Eating the fruits of careful preservation makes the lesson tangible. You sip watered-down mead, feeling warmth spread as the cold morning lingers outside. The afternoon is dedicated to creating more storage solutions: baskets, bins, and small smokehouses. Every structure is practical, reinforced with local materials, designed to last through months of snow and wind. You notice inscriptions carved into the bins, a small blessing or protective charm. Even in mundane tasks, belief and practicality intertwine seamlessly. By evening, the village pauses to reflect on the day. Food stores are secured, roots and grains protected, fish salted and stacked. The work is tiring but grounding. Each small act of diligence has immediate and lasting impact. You understand with a new depth that survival here depends on foresight, skill, and meticulous care. As night settles, the hearth glows warmly, villagers settle near the fire, and smoke curls lazily from chimneys. You sit quietly, absorbing the rhythm of labor and reflection, feeling both exhausted and oddly reassured. The frost outside glistens softly, and you sense the quiet triumph of preparation, the invisible scaffolding that allows this village to endure. Dawn arrives slowly, a soft gray wash over the fjord. You trudge along the frozen path toward the village outskirts, where the forests begin and the wild stretches unchecked. Today, you'll learn about hunting and tracking, skills essential to supplement the village's stores and maintain balance with nature. You tighten your cloak, the chill biting, and take a deep breath of crisp air, tasting frost, pine, and distant salt. Tor leaf leads you quietly, pointing out subtle signs: broken twigs, faint footprints, and patches of disturbed snow. Observation is everything. You learn to read the forest like a book, the habits of deer, foxes, and rabbits all inscribed in tracks and vegetation. Even the wind's direction matters. Scents travel differently, and subtle cues can mean success or failure. Historians still debate how much Vikings relied on oral tradition versus trial and error when hunting, but this immersive practice makes it clear both were essential. A quirky survival tactic catches your eye: small pits hidden beneath leaves or snow used as traps for game. Ingenious yet simple, they demonstrate how creativity supplements strength and knowledge. You assist in setting a small snare, careful not to disturb it prematurely. The precision required sharpens your focus, and you realize hunting isn't about brute force. It's patience, observation, and understanding behavior. By midday, you track a deer across a thin ribbon of frozen stream. Its movement is silent, deliberate. You follow at a distance, marveling at its grace and awareness. Runa reminds you, we take only what we need. Respect the rhythm of life. That ethos permeates everything here. Survival is intertwined with respect for nature, not conquest. After returning to the village with small game, you help prepare the catch. Skinning, cleaning, and curing meat is painstaking but essential work. Each step preserves the food, maximizing its utility through winter. You notice the subtle collaboration. One person stretches the hide, another arranges the meat, a third prepares the fire. Coordination ensures survival. Later, you join a group teaching children about tracking and foraging in tandem with hunting. The young ones mimic gestures, scan the ground for signs, and ask endless questions. Why this footprint? One asks. Runa demonstrates, showing how to interpret even the faintest impressions. You see firsthand how knowledge is passed down, ensuring that survival skills persist through generations. As evening falls, you assist in hanging cured meat and smoked fish for storage. The air is filled with aroma, earthy, smoky, faintly sweet, and the village hums with quiet satisfaction. Firelight flickers across walls, casting long shadows. You sit back, watching children play near the hearth, elders discuss the day's labor, and everyone seems to breathe easier knowing resources are secure. The fjord whispers beyond the village, the wind bending trees gently. You reflect on the rhythm of life here: observation, patience, creativity, and respect. Survival isn't a single heroic act but a tapestry of countless careful decisions, woven day by day. You feel the quiet weight of continuity, the knowledge, skill, and endurance that will carry the village through another winter. By nightfall, frost glints on rooftops, smoke curls from chimneys, and you settle near the fire, body tired but mind attentive. The village sleeps lightly around you, cocooned in warmth, sustenance, and practiced care. Tonight, you understand the subtle genius of Viking survival: constant adaptation, interdependence, and unwavering attention to the world around you. The morning arrives softly, the fjord bathed in muted gold as you trudge toward the village square. Today's focus is on community rituals and celebrations, the threads that bind survival, labor, and belief into a shared life. Even in a small, frost-bitten village, moments of collective joy and reflection are essential. They remind everyone why the work matters and strengthen ties that make the harsh winters bearable. You notice smoke curling more deliberately from certain homes, and the faint scent of spiced porridge drifts through the air. Villagers gather slowly, sharing quiet greetings, laughter muffled by woolen cloaks. Children run ahead, carrying small bundles of herbs or flowers for offerings, while elders supervise the preparations. The energy is gentle, intentional, a calm contrast to the relentless labor of previous days. Runa guides you to the central longhouse, where a small fire crackles in preparation for the ritual. You see offerings placed on a wooden table, small carved figures, coins, grains, and woven charms. Each item represents a plea, a gratitude, or a hope for protection. Historians still debate the extent to which Vikings considered these purely symbolic versus spiritually efficacious, but in the village, the intent imbues every gesture with meaning. The ritual begins quietly. Voices rise in a low, harmonious chant, harmonizing with the crackle of fire and the occasional gust of wind against the walls. You sway slightly, drawn into the cadence. The rhythm is almost hypnotic, grounding. You notice children mimicking movements, their small hands attempting careful gestures with herbs and trinkets. Observation and participation are the foundation of cultural continuity here. One quirky detail catches your attention. Some households incorporate playful elements into the ritual, like tossing a small carved bird into the fire to symbolize freedom or mischief. The act seems whimsical, even humorous, yet carries the weight of tradition. You remember earlier days watching similar practices, realizing that the Vikings blended solemnity with subtle levity, a reminder that survival isn't devoid of joy. After the ritual, villagers share a communal meal: freshly baked bread, salted fish, boiled roots, and modest portions of preserved meat. The act of eating together reinforces bonds, demonstrating that survival is collective. Every morsel is appreciated. Conversation is soft and rhythmic, often punctuated by stories passed down over generations. As the day wanes, you watch as small dramas unfold. A child spills porridge, a goat wanders too close to a fire, an elder corrects a weaving mistake. None are catastrophic, each handled with patience, laughter, and guidance. Life here is resilient yet tender, demanding attention but rewarding with community and belonging. By late afternoon, villagers begin tidying, storing tools, and preparing for the evening. You walk along familiar paths, observing the harmony of daily tasks, small rituals, and shared labor. You realize survival in this village isn't merely physical endurance. It's a web of relationships, knowledge, and careful attention to both human and natural worlds. As night falls, the longhouse glows warmly against the dark fjord. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. The wind carries distant sounds of waves and occasional bird calls. You sit near the hearth, reflecting on the days spent learning, laboring, and observing. Each task, whether tending animals, repairing tools, foraging, fishing, or celebrating rituals, has been part of a delicate balance sustaining the village. You feel the rhythm of life here, the intertwined cycles of labor, observation, belief, and community. Each day, small actions ripple into survival, and each night, the quiet reflection strengthens both body and spirit. Here, In this frost-bitten settlement, endurance is cultivated through skill, patience, and connection. The village sleeps lightly around you, cocooned in warmth, sustenance, and practiced care. The village has settled into quiet now. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, mixing with the crisp scent of frost and pine. You sit near the hearth, feeling the slow, steady warmth seep into your bones. The day's labor, the long hours of observation and participation, have left you pleasantly exhausted, and your mind begins to soften, drifting toward a gentle reverie. Outside, the fjord glimmers faintly under the moonlight, waves lapping softly against frozen shores, a lullaby for both the land and its people. You take a deep breath and let it out slowly, noticing how each inhalation fills your lungs with the cold, fresh air that the village has absorbed all day. You reflect on the delicate balance of life here: labor, community, observation, and belief interwoven seamlessly into survival. The villagers' careful tending of animals, crops, tools, and rituals has created a rhythm that feels both ancient and comforting. Even the small, quirky details, the moss placed between roots, the bells on goats, the carved charms in boats and homes, speak of mindfulness, ingenuity, and attention to subtlety. Each is a gentle reminder that life is made resilient through small acts repeated over time. Your eyes wander to the flickering flames, and you notice shadows dancing softly on timbered walls, elongating and shrinking with each crackle. The warmth and movement feel like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. You recall the lessons learned over these days, the patience required to weave, mend, forage, and track, the concentration needed to repair tools, prepare food, and preserve supplies, and the awareness that survival depends on respect for both nature and human connections. Every task, mundane or ceremonial, contributes to the continuity of life. You remember the children mimicking adults, wide-eyed and eager to participate. Their curiosity and careful observation demonstrate the cycles of knowledge passing from one generation to the next. There is a comforting rhythm in seeing how the villagers nurture both skill and spirit, blending practicality with small rituals of care and celebration. You realize that endurance here is cultivated as much by teaching and guidance as by physical strength. Outside, the wind whispers through frost-tipped trees, and the soft lap of water against the fjord punctuates the silence. You imagine the village under a thin blanket of snow, roofs glinting faintly under moonlight, animals nestled in their pens, and the distant hills standing sentinel over this tiny community. There is a slow, measured beauty to the scene, a reminder that even in hardship, life can be quiet, steady, and deeply satisfying. You let your attention drift to the smells around the hearth, the earthy tang of herbs, the faint sweetness of baked grains, and the lingering aroma of salted fish. Each scent carries a story, a memory of labor and care, of preparation and survival. The village exists in harmony with the land, each sensory detail a link between human effort and environmental rhythm. You find a gentle calm in knowing that these patterns, repeated day after day, sustain not just bodies but also hearts and minds. Your body relaxes further, heavy from effort, warmed by the fire, and soothed by the hum of domestic life. You notice the rhythm of your heartbeat syncing, slowly, with the subtle noises of the village, the occasional creak of timber, a soft shuffle of animals, the rustle of a breeze across frost-laden grass. Each sound is a quiet affirmation of continuity, a gentle pulse linking you to the community and the land. The sky outside deepens into indigo, and stars begin to pierce the darkness, faint and steady. You imagine the same constellations that the villagers have gazed upon for generations, guiding sailors and reminding all who watch of the cycles of time. The presence of the cosmos, vast yet constant, mirrors the steadiness of the village itself. Small lives, careful routines, and shared rituals, these are the threads that weave together enduring communities. As you settle more fully into your blankets near the fire, you feel a profound connection to the slow rhythm of life around you. Survival, you realize, is less about heroics and more about attention. To tools, to animals, to the land, to one another. The villagers' lives are a delicate choreography of observation, patience, and small acts of care repeated over years and seasons. There is a quiet triumph in these repetitions, a subtle mastery of circumstance, a resilience built not from force but from mindfulness and continuity. You close your eyes briefly, imagining walking past the longhouses, hearing muted conversation, seeing shadows flicker across walls, feeling the weight of cold and warmth alternating gently across your skin. You feel your thoughts slowing, drifting like the smoke curling above the hearth, untangling from the day's busyness, aligning instead with the gentle patterns of the village. Outside, the fjord murmurs softly, and the trees shiver in the wind, while inside, warmth, light, and quiet companionship hold sway. Each sound, smell, and movement blends into a soft, protective rhythm. You notice how the subtle details, small, intentional, careful, construct not only survival but comfort, stability, and even a sort of understated joy. The village, frozen yet alive, quiet yet purposeful, settles further into the evening. You breathe deeply, letting the chill fade from your lungs, letting your body melt into the blankets, letting your mind absorb the gentle, steady cadence of this frostbitten yet enduring life. The balance of work, rest, observation, and belief creates a sense of profound security. You feel it seep into your consciousness, grounding you, calming you, preparing you to drift into sleep. Your final thought, before the quiet of night carries you completely, is a deep appreciation for rhythm, endurance, and connection. The villagers' careful attention to each task, each relationship, and each small, quirky practice has crafted a world where life persists despite cold, wind, and scarcity. And now, cocooned in warmth, you feel yourself part of that continuity, carried gently into night by the timeless pulse of survival, community, and care. Night settles over the village like a soft, gray blanket, and you trudge along familiar paths, your boots crunching lightly against frost-kissed ground. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, carrying the earthy scent of burning wood, mingling with the faint sweetness of baked grains cooling on windowsills. The fjord mirrors the silver of the moon, still and reflective, a quiet companion to the village's slowing rhythm. You pause for a moment, taking it all in, the gentle hum of life winding down, the muted chatter of neighbors, the soft snort of goats in pens, and the occasional hiss of the wind brushing against rooftops. Everything seems deliberate, each sound, smell, and motion part of a larger, delicate pattern that sustains life here. You approach the central longhouse, drawn by the comforting glow of firelight flickering against timbered walls. Villagers are gathering near the hearth, seeking warmth, connection, and a brief respite from the day's labor. Children lean against elders, absorbing stories in wide-eyed silence, while mothers quietly stir thick porridge, ensuring each spoonful nourishes. Young men, whose hands have been busy mending nets and repairing tools, sit with steady breathing, their gaze tracing familiar patterns in the flames. You notice subtle rhythms in their movement, gestures almost synchronized, a shared understanding that labor has ended and reflection begins. An elder begins to speak, recounting tales of past voyages across icy fjords, hunts that demanded patience and cunning, and legends of ancestors who braved storms and strange lands. The stories are rich with both instruction and imagination. You hear hints of humor in tales of minor mishaps, a goat wandering into a smokehouse, a fisherman mistaking a seal for a fish trap, but underlying each story is a lesson about observation, skill, and the careful attention required to endure. One quirky detail catches your attention. The elder mentions leaving small carved birds near the fire for household spirits, a practice intended to protect the home while adding a subtle charm to the hearth. Scholars still debate whether such rituals were purely symbolic or spiritually functional, but here, in the warmth of community, they carry meaning both practical and emotional. You watch the children mimic gestures, weaving small bundles of herbs or laying coins carefully on a wooden table. Every movement seems infused with intent, a gentle training in responsibility, observation, and respect. You feel yourself drawn into the quiet pulse of the village, noticing how each subtle action, from arranging firewood to adjusting a drying fish, is part of an interconnected web that sustains life. Even the mundane is elevated by awareness, and you recognize that survival here is a dance of diligence, skill, and quiet mindfulness. A soft breeze drifts through the open doorway, carrying the scent of the fjord and the distant whisper of waves. You inhale deeply, letting the cool night air mix with the warmth of the fire. Your hands, still tinged with the chill of the evening, feel soothed by the flickering heat. You notice small sounds, the soft creak of timber settling, the muted shuffle of a blanket, a goat's bell jingling faintly as it shifts in its pen. These details, subtle yet persistent, ground you in the present, creating a serene awareness of the village's rhythm. As the evening progresses, stories continue, punctuated by quiet laughter and gentle commentary. You notice the integration of superstition into daily life, an offering of herbs placed on a window ledge, a protective carving tucked by the door, smoke spiraling from incense burned to honor unseen spirits. These small rituals are neither disruptive nor ostentatious. They are woven seamlessly into the fabric of living, reminders that life is not only survival but care, observation, and intention. You reflect on the lessons from previous days, mending nets, tending livestock, foraging for roots and berries, preparing and storing food, and tracking game. Each act required patience, observation, and thoughtful attention. Now, in this calm evening, the cumulative weight of that knowledge settles in your mind, bringing clarity. You realize survival here is not measured in heroics or strength alone. It is cultivated through mindfulness, cooperation, and subtle acts of care repeated daily. Outside, the fjord glimmers in moonlight, its waves lapping gently against frozen shores. Trees shiver lightly in the wind, and a distant owl calls softly, breaking the hushed rhythm. You watch shadows stretch and shrink across walls, shadows of humans and animals alike, a visual echo of the day's effort. Even the mundane, the sweep of a broom, the placement of a pot near the fire, the stacking of stored roots, is imbued with significance. You feel yourself slowing, aligning with the village's cadence, each breath in sync with quiet movement, each exhale releasing tension accumulated from hours of labor. As firelight flickers against the walls, illuminating faces and casting gentle shadows, you feel the soft warmth on your skin and the subtle weight of contentment. The children, now drowsy, curl near the elders. The adults continue quiet conversation. The animals rest comfortably in pens and stalls. All is calm. The village, like a living organism, breathes gently, its heartbeat mirrored in your own slowing pulse. You notice the delicate balance. Work, reflection, storytelling, and ritual intertwine seamlessly, sustaining both body and spirit. Finally, the longhouse quiets. The fire's glow softens, smoke rising in slender tendrils to disappear into the night. The fjord beyond shimmers faintly under starlight, reflecting an unbroken cycle of time and continuity. You feel your body relax fully, heavy from the day's effort, and your mind drifts toward gentle reverie. Each small action, each carefully tended detail, has contributed to the ongoing survival and harmony of this village. The subtle genius of their endurance, patience, observation, cooperation, and connection to both nature and one another settles around you like a protective cloak. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the village asleep beneath frost and moonlight, the sounds, smells, and warmth lingering in memory. Survival here is not a singular heroic act but a tapestry of careful decisions, communal care, and reverent observation. You feel the quiet satisfaction of being part of that rhythm, a gentle immersion into continuity, safety, and calm. The last thing you notice is the soft, steady crackle of the fire, the distant murmur of the fjord, and the hushed breathing of the village settling into rest. Your mind and body, guided by rhythm, reflection, and warmth, drift naturally towards sleep, cocooned in the timeless pulse of this frostbitten yet enduring life. The village is quiet now, blanketed under a soft, silver-gray night. Frost glints faintly on rooftops, making them shimmer like distant stars captured on Earth. The fjord reflects the pale moonlight, its surface barely rippling, carrying only the faint echo of water brushing against frozen shores. You walk slowly along familiar paths, boots crunching lightly against the snow, and feel the crisp air fill your lungs. Each breath tastes of pine, frost, and distant smoke from dying hearths. The stillness of the night is almost tangible, wrapping the village in a serene cocoon that hums quietly in rhythm with your own heartbeat. Animals are settling into their pens and shelters. Goats huddle close together for warmth, their bells jingling softly with tiny movements. Chickens are tucked under straw, occasionally clucking as they shift to a comfortable position. Dogs curl near hearths in longhouses, tails twitching gently as sleep takes over. Even the occasional snort of a cow or rustle of hay feels rhythmic, a soft accompaniment to the hush that has descended across the village. The air is filled with subtle sounds, distant waves lapping the fjord, wind brushing across timbered rooftops, a faint creak of settling wood. Each sound is delicate, measured, and oddly comforting, signaling that life continues even in rest. You pass a longhouse where children are asleep on straw beds, blankets drawn snugly around them. Their breaths rise and fall softly, synchronized with the quiet warmth of the fire and the gentle draft of night air slipping through small gaps in the walls. Elders check embers once more, ensuring the fire will continue to smolder safely through the night, then retreat to their own spaces. The village is alive, yet every movement is measured, subdued, a dance of calm that guides everyone toward rest. The smell of fading smoke mixes with lingering herbs and the earthy scent of frozen ground. You inhale slowly, letting the aromas remind you of the day's labors, foraging in the forest, mending nets, tending animals, and preserving food. You realize how these small, repeated actions, carefully layered, observed, and shared, create the continuity that allows life to persist here, even in harsh winters. A quirky detail floats to your mind. Children sometimes count stars before sleeping, a playful way to memorize stories and map the night sky, turning observation into learning without effort. Historians still debate how much such nighttime rituals impacted practical survival, but here, they clearly create calm, rhythm, and continuity. You pause beside the central hearth. The fire has dimmed to a gentle glow, embers smoldering quietly, casting long shadows on timbered walls. You feel its warmth, gentle but steady, soaking into chilled fingers and toes. The soft flicker of light dances across faces and objects, painting the village in comforting shades of amber and gray. Smoke drifts lazily, curling upward, carrying a hint of wood, herbs, and memories of the day. You breathe deeply, letting the warmth and quiet envelop you, aligning your senses with the village's slow, deliberate rhythm. Looking toward the fjord, you notice how moonlight reflects silver trails across the water, tracing subtle ripples with each gentle wave. Trees shiver softly in the cold, their branches outlined like delicate filigree against the night sky. Stars begin to prick the indigo heavens above, steady and familiar. The village, nestled among hills and fjord, exudes resilience, a quiet endurance shaped by skill, observation, and care. Every home, animal, and person contributes to this delicate web, reinforcing the notion that survival here is not just physical, but also emotional, communal, and mindful. You imagine your body, heavy with the day's work, muscles relaxing, eyes growing soft and unfocused. Each breath slows, each heartbeat feels measured, as though syncing with the subtle pulse of the village. You feel your awareness settle gently into the environment. The flicker of firelight, the distant lap of water, the rustle of animals, the faint whistling of wind through timber. The night surrounds you like a soft blanket, every sound, scent, and movement guiding you into stillness. Subtle rituals of protection remain in place. Small charms by windows, herbs burned in longhouses, coins carefully tucked in corners. Though simple, they bring comfort, a sense of continuity, and reassurance that the unseen is observed and respected. You reflect that Vikings blended practicality with superstition, making daily survival a tapestry of observation, care, and symbolic reassurance. In this moment, you feel that same harmony. You are both participant and observer, connected to the pulse of life, to the rhythm of work and rest, and to the enduring patterns of nature. You walk slowly back through frost-covered paths, inhaling the cool, crisp air one final time. Each step is mindful, deliberate, as if walking in concert with the village itself. Your mind drifts through the lessons learned over days in this community, how patience and observation sustain life, how small innovations can protect or enhance survival, and how cooperation and shared knowledge form the true foundation of endurance. Every story, every chore, every small, quirky ritual contributes to this invisible web. Finally, you settle near the hearth one last time. The fire flickers gently, embers glowing soft and steady. Outside, the fjord is silver and calm, hills silhouetted against the moon, stars twinkling above in quiet constancy. You feel warmth, safety, and connection, enveloped by both the human and natural world. Breath slows, muscles loosen, and your mind drifts toward the gentle edges of sleep. In this midnight calm, you understand that survival is more than strength or heroics. It is rhythm, observation, care, continuity, and the quiet bonds that tie a community together. The village endures through attention, mindfulness, and shared effort, and tonight, you are part of that enduring pattern, cocooned in warmth, security, and the timeless pulse of life.